Hi everyone, my name is Sofia and I will talk about data visualization project that turned into a data-driven experience and why we as data practitioners should not stop on creating data visualizations. And I will start with a question. Imagine your favorite data visualization. So something that you're really proud of or maybe have seen recently and really liked. What else do you think this data could be to serve even greater purpose? A food for thought, just a couple of examples where data visualization truly went beyond its intrinsic quality of informing the audience. A recent and a really cool project, Perpetual Plastic, where a project team has created a data art sculpture from a marine debris collected from the nearby beach in Bali. Or a data-driven fashion collection, a collaboration of Giorgio Lupi and other stories, where a data about three remarkable women scientists ended up to be a part of the wearable items. Or even a Spotify yearly wrap, one of not so many examples when user data, massively collected by the tech companies, not only feeds the algorithms, but actually comes back to the audience in some sort of a meaningful and even fun byproduct. So, back to this question. It's not only about the artistic representation or some unconventional shape and form of the data. All of those projects have a different angle to them. They speak to the new audience, or they cover a new use case, or they have an alternative way to experience data in a more sustainable and lasting way. They essentially turn data into a living product or service. I was always fascinated by this broader context of data, but never had an idea how to approach it properly until the moment when I started thinking about it from the perspective of experience design. So, I really want to share a story of a personal project that changed my career path from data visualization practitioner to an information experience designer. One winter evening 3 years ago, I watched Tales by Light, a Netflix docu-series where a big part of season 3, episode 1 and 2 was about Tashgaon slum. So the Tashgaon slum is a place in Bangladesh where people for decades have been living literally on the railway tracks. I remember the story struck me deeply. I just finished a project in the United Arab Emirates where we were building a dashboard for the city council, so I had to look a lot at a lot of data, census data, public projects, infrastructure projects, the abundance of the city services. So obviously this contrast of how people can live in one place and another place played its role, and I really wanted to learn more about this another place featured in Tales by Light documentary. So I texted Simon Lister, who was a photographer and a filmmaker on the Tales by Light project back then, and he replied, which was super cool. So we exchanged a little bit, and I was basically trying to find out some more information that was already available in the public sources, some emotional stories, and so on. So after a bit of a research, I knew where exactly the slum was located. I knew that on a state of 2014, according to the slum population census, Roughly 5,000 people live there. I also knew that this is not the only place in Bangladesh, and there are other slums. Some are even bigger than this one. People fleeing from poverty, natural disasters, conflicts basically were occupying each and every free patch of land all across the country. So, in the beginning, I really didn't know how to make this story stand out. Rewatching the documentary again and again, I was struck by a very unexpected analogy of a Tashgaon slum and the Highline. So, the Highline is a 2-mile long greenway in a public park in New York City, created at a place of an old decommissioned railway tracks. So, this is how the narrative around the Project Contrast was born: urban speculation, compare and contrast, two territories with one common feature, habitat along the railway lines, but at the same time a striking contrast of living conditions. But honestly, beyond that, I was not sure what to do next with this project. I was not sure what sort of shape and form it should take. Should it be a data visualization, or maybe it should be a sort of mini docu-series, a continuation of Tales by Light, or something else. But most importantly, it was very difficult for me to talk about this project and explain it to someone else. I really stuck with it, and I put it on hold for almost 2 years. I must say this barrier had a huge effect on me. I realized that I'm lacking some fundamental skills, both on design side and a technical side. So I took a break from work and I went to study. I'm not saying that this is a way to go necessarily, but to me it helped. I had sufficient time to immerse myself in all kinds of subjects like product design, user research, and even some specific research fields like emotional design or speculative design. And besides, I was close to one of the subjects of my research, the Highline, since the grad school was in New York. 2 years later, which was in February last year, I picked it up again. With some new perspective, I finally came up with a definition of the product: data-driven donation campaign. Data-driven donation campaign, what does it even mean? So the idea was iterating with the amount of the donation, demonstrate what it is equivalent to in both places. For example, a coffee to go in New York versus a meal in Tashgaon slum. This approach would then result in a series of speculative scenarios. Knowing prices for coffee and meal and things like visitation activity at the Highline, you could hypothesize. You could say something like, if 800 people who are visiting the Highline today would each make a donation equivalent of 1 coffee cup, this would provide an evening meal to the entire slum population, which is roughly 5,000 people. So digging more into data, the Highline publications, UNICEF child labor reports, prices and wages index, even railway schedules. A few other interesting comparisons emerged. Like the fact that adopting one echinacea plant at the Highline costs the same as 77 pounds of produce, for example eggplants, in the slum. Or one apartment in a super luxurious residence at the 28th Street at around the Highline is comparable to the entire country low-income housing budget in Bangladesh. So, this concept of quantifiable help is not new. Many NGOs have already used it in all kinds of charity appeals, basically saying something like, if you are donating $10, you're helping us to provide textbooks to children. The novelty of Project Contrast is that this model is embedded into a visitor experience and basically is supposed to amplify emotional response through a relation to a concrete place while being there. While this was all yet to be verified, as well as this idea of quantifiable contrast, it was crucial from the very beginning that everyone understands that Project Contrast is not an attempt to critique economic privileges of the Western society. It's rather a radical way to call for awareness and compassion. So the next was user research. By then, Project Contrast team has grown, and in April 2021, we had a field study. We went on site in Tashgaon and at the Highline and mixing methods of interviews and ethnographic research. We talked to people around, marked the contrast and similarities of both places, collected data and anecdotes. Our observations resulted in 7 short stories and later on became an interactive publication available at procontrast.org, where readers can walk along the virtual railway line and read stories about both places. Having this research and groundwork completed, I reached out to the Highline operating company to pitch an idea of data-driven donation campaign. Since all 7 stories of Project Contrast are site-specific, so they talk about a concrete street or a building or garden or a market, the idea was to place QR codes at each story point at the Highline, let visitors go through the journey, and then have a donation prompt at the end. Now, unfortunately, the Highline didn't buy this idea, explaining it with the fact that they don't allow any sort of third-party charity events on their premises, and suggested to rethink the whole idea and kind of repurpose it more as an art performance. And here we go again. I was very disappointed. I really thought that this might be the end of the entire project. I even symbolized it by making a tattoo on my back. Yes, featuring the key visuals from an interactive publication. Well, what do you do when you're stuck with your projects? Luckily, this was not the end of the story. As my network grew, I met a few really cool people who helped me along the way. One of them were founders of New York-based startup Gesso that just launched an application with an audio tour guides around the city recently. And Project Contrast is soon to be a mobile walking audio tour at the Highline. Let me show you how it works. So with this app, when at the Highline, you can choose Project Contrast as a free tour. You can walk through the same journey as was previously designed for the physical experience with the QR codes. Even better, the content will automatically start playing as soon as you reach a location featured in this or another story. On the last step, there will be integration with the donation service. The tour will be launched in spring. I honestly wish that by now I had something else to talk about than research and publications and application prototypes, something more tangible, things like amount of donation gathered. But I don't. Even more so, sometimes an imposter syndrome hits and the end of everything seems too far away and I start questioning it all. Like, come on, it's been 3 years since I saw this documentary. It's like way too long for a project like this that's supposed to offer help. And in a moments of despair like this, I started seeking some alternative ways to measure an impact of side projects. And I came up with some sort of a system that really helped me. Well, first of all, like with every research, you're creating a new instance of knowledge in some shape and form. Like in my case, I was really interested in this concept of micro donation campaigns powered by data and how viable they are. Then, if this knowledge becomes a part of the public domain, then someone else can benefit from it in the future. So, regardless the success or failure for your project, there is anyways an effect for a common system of knowledge. Second, network. Eventually, your project becomes your microphone and a speakerphone, or basically a tool to hear and reach out to people. Like in our case, there are no financial results yet, but 34 people in the slum interviewed, and they had a chance to speak up. And we took this information and translated it and told this to another group of people who would never ever hear it in another way. So we only hope that maybe this sparks something in their minds. Plus, there is another group of people who I pitched this product to, more like a partners, which now a part of my network, which is also great. And finally, new skills. A bit more egocentric, but why not? In my case, this project really helped me to have more hands-on experience with product design, user research, programming, even public speaking. More than 80 hours in 2021, and this is only what was on the record, so scrape from the calendar. So if you're thinking whether or not to start a personal project, go for it. And if you keep thinking about the first question I asked in the beginning on how to go beyond of data visualization, I'll be really happy to share a few things that usually help me. First, picture people. Either those that data speaks about or a group that you're appealing to with this data, up to you. But the idea is that any human-centered product or service should have an audience. Second, practice mind mapping. If you want this product to be something else than a dashboard, visualize metaphors, not only data. Try weird analogies or turn to your other passions. Like if you like games, imagine this data as a game. And 3, discover missing data. Just because the ideation process around where and how and when to collect the data is so interesting and fascinating, it will most likely result in a cool product, service, or a campaign by itself. Thank you, and good luck with turning data into living products and services.